Welcome, podcast listeners, to another exciting dive into the human experience. I'm your host, Nina, and today we're geeking out about something incredibly foundational, culture, and how it shapes who we are. And joining me, as always, is our brilliant Audie. Welcome.
It's great to be here. I'm thrilled to unravel the fascinating threads that connect culture to our individual selves and our social interactions.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. When we talk about culture, it's a word we use all the time, but what does it really mean? Can you help us define it?
That's a fantastic starting point. Culture is actually a really complex concept, much more than just music, food, or traditions, although those are certainly parts of it. Think of it as a dynamic system of rules, both explicit and implicit, that groups establish to ensure their survival. It encompasses shared attitudes, values, beliefs, norms, and behaviors. For example, why do some societies prioritize individual achievement while others focus on group harmony? That's culture at play, shaping the very way people interact and what they value in life. It's essentially the learned meanings that are maintained and passed down through generations within a human population.
That's a really comprehensive way to look at it. So it's not just static, it's dynamic and ensures group survival. That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of how culture is passed down, two terms that often come up are enculturation and acculturation. Could you explain the difference between them?
Certainly. These two processes are key to how we learn and adopt cultural aspects. Think of enculturation as the process of learning your native culture, the one you're born into. It starts right after birth and is often a smooth, almost involuntary process. For instance, a child growing up in Japan naturally learns Japanese customs, language, and social norms from their parents' family and surroundings. They absorb these cultural elements as part of their upbringing.
So it's about absorbing the culture you're born into right from the start.
Exactly. Now, acculturation is quite different. It's what happens when a person adapts to, and sometimes adopts, a culture different from their original one. This typically occurs when someone migrates to a new country or is exposed to a new cultural environment. The key difference here is that acculturation often involves navigating conflicts between what you already know from your original culture and the new practices you encounter.
That's a great distinction. So, enculturation is like growing up immersed in your home culture, and acculturation is adapting to a new one. Can you give us some more real-life examples of the agents that drive this enculturation process? Who are the main players?
Absolutely. The document highlights several key agents. Firstly, parents and siblings are incredibly influential, being an infant's earliest environmental impact. For example, studies show that Japanese mothers might use personal and interpersonal ties to get their children to comply, while American mothers might lean more on rewards and punishments, reflecting broader cultural differences in parenting. Even something as basic as sleeping arrangements varies culturally. Many American parents prefer separate rooms for children, whereas Indian parents often co-sleep to foster a strong mother-child bond, viewing separate sleeping as neglectful. Siblings also play a mutual socialization role, passing on beliefs and behaviors to each other. In large families, older siblings might even take on caregiving responsibilities.
It's fascinating how even something as sleeping arrangements can be so culturally ingrained. What about the wider family?
Precisely. Then we have the extended family. In many non-Western cultures, the concept of a joint family is prevalent, where grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins live together under one roof. This provides children with a strong sense of belonging, abundant playmates, and a limitless supply of love and warmth, reinforcing loyalty and respect for authority. Even when Asian, Indian, Americans immigrate to Western countries, they often maintain these joint family values.
So, a much broader network of influence there. And what about outside the family unit? Peer groups, for instance?
Peer relations are another crucial agent. Peer groups, typically friends of similar age, allow individuals to learn autonomy without adult involvement, develop coping strategies, and even construct their identity. For instance, friendships can teach social competencies like reciprocity and cooperation. Interestingly, the document mentions how homo-ethnic friendships, friends from one's own ethnic group, can provide comfort, but hetero-ethnic friendships, those from other ethnic groups, can bolster the acculturation process.
That makes sense. Comfort and familiarity, but growth through diversity. And I imagine formal education plays a huge role too.
And of course, education plays a pivotal role. Formal schooling transmits culturally appropriate skills and values. Cultural differences in teaching styles are fascinating. Chinese and Japanese teachers might spend more time with students compared to those in the US, and American systems often praise correct answers, while Indian, Japanese, and Taiwanese cultures focus more on correcting mistakes. Even curriculum content can shape culture. For example, some curriculum might unintentionally marginalize certain cultural groups by promoting a monolithic identity.
So education isn't just about facts, it's about cultural molding. What about religion?
And finally, religion is a powerful agent of enculturation. Historically, religion and education were often intertwined, with religious texts like the Torah or Vedas serving as sources of learning. Even today, religious practices can transmit language and principles to the next generation, like for Punjabi parents in England. Religious ceremonies like a bar mitzvah or Ramadan fasting mark transitions and reinforce cultural values.
Wow, those are incredibly detailed examples. It really paints a picture of how deeply embedded culture is in every aspect of our upbringing. So, with all these different cultural influences, how does our self, our very sense of who we are, change across cultures?
That's a profound question, and it brings us to the fascinating concept of self-construals. Generally, societies are categorized into two broad types, individualist and collectivist. In individualist societies, typically found in Western countries like the United States, there's a strong emphasis on an independent sense of self. People internalize values of independence, focusing on personal goals, self-actualization, and standing out. They often attribute achievements to their own qualities and decisions. Think of the common narrative of the self-made individual, achieving personal dreams. They also tend to have a broader radius of trust, extending to those outside their immediate group.
So it's very much about the I in individualistic cultures. What about the other side of that coin?
On the other hand, collectivist societies, common in Eastern and many non-European cultures, foster an interdependent sense of self. Here, the focus is on conformity and loyalty to the group, prioritizing group interests over individual ones, and maintaining group cohesiveness. People perceive themselves within the context of their social relations. Their motivation to achieve is often tied to social goals and obligations, like bringing honor to the family. They tend to have a narrower trust radius, being more trusting of their in-group members and potentially more discriminatory towards outgroups.
It's a huge difference in worldview, isn't it? The document even mentions how India is often considered collectivist, but it's actually highly situation-based. Students might be collectivist with family and friends, but individualistic when dealing with personal issues. It's a fascinating blend.
That's a fantastic point about India, illustrating how complex these categorizations can be. It shows that societies aren't always neatly one or the other.
Given all these cultural nuances, I'm curious about how common experiences like group membership or even aggression differ across cultures. Does our cultural background change how we behave in social settings?
Absolutely. It profoundly impacts social behavior. Let's take group membership. In collectivist cultures, where the interdependent self thrives, there's a strong emphasis on in-group loyalty and cohesion. Individuals might feel a deeper sense of responsibility to their group and make decisions that prioritize the group's welfare over their own. In individualist cultures, while group membership is still important, there's often more room for individual expression within the group.
So the dynamics within a group can be quite different. What about how we perceive others or explain their actions?
Then there's in-group identification versus in-group bias. While identifying with your in-group is natural, in-group bias is when that identification leads to preferential treatment or a more positive evaluation of your group over others. This can manifest differently depending on cultural values regarding competition and harmony. Attribution is another interesting area. This refers to how we explain behavior, our own and others. In individualist cultures, there's a tendency to attribute behavior to dispositional factors, like someone's personality or traits, largely ignoring situational influences. So, if someone is late, you might think they're irresponsible. In collectivist cultures, people are more likely to explain behaviors in context-specific terms, attributing them to situational factors. Being late might be understood due to an unexpected traffic or an unavoidable obligation.
That's a big one, how we assign blame or credit. And what about something like aggression, which seems universal?
And aggression? Well, aggression exists universally. Cultural norms can influence its expression, and even what is considered aggressive. Some cultures might have more direct forms of expressing anger, while others might favor indirect or more socially acceptable outlets.
So the form of aggression can be culturally shaped. And finally, how do culture influence relationships and attraction?
Finally, person perception, attraction, and relationships. What makes someone attractive, or how relationships are formed and maintained, can differ widely. For example, the concept of love and marriage varies from individualistic choices to family-arranged unions, each deeply embedded in cultural expectations and values. The dynamics of communication, expression of affection, and conflict resolution are all culturally shaped.
This has been such an insightful conversation. It's clear that culture isn't just something we observe, it's intricately woven into our very being, from how we see ourselves to how we interact with the world. To wrap things up, what's one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember about culture and self?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that our understanding of self is not universal. It's deeply cultural. Whether you lean more towards an independent self or an interdependent self, your culture shapes your motivations, perceptions, and interactions in profound ways. Recognizing these differences isn't about judging, but about fostering greater understanding and empathy across our diverse human experience.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, Adi. This has been incredibly enlightening.
My pleasure. Always happy to share insights.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of our podcast. Until next time, keep exploring the incredible world around and within you.